Well, my next game I show you to the chapter of opening errors or blunders is a game I actually lost to Diamante Daulicio from Lithuania. Nowadays she is called Diamante Connect, and well, I can tell you what I learned from this loss is not only that, of course, I mean, I am aware now of this particular line she chose, but the main thing actually I learned was that I was quite stupid. Once I prepared against her for this particular game, I only checked her games and I totally forgot to check her husband's games. And her husband is a grandmaster from France. His name is Mathieu Cornet. And if I had checked his games as well on this particular line, then likely I wouldn't have lost, at least not this way out of the opening. I was white and I went for d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, and she went for bishop b4. And actually this line is quite popular nowadays, but not because of the old theory, which I was aware of, but because of the new theory, which I was not aware of. I went for a3. I mean, possibly you can also play like c takes d5, e takes d5, and then go for bishop f4, but the drawback is once you take on d5 you give some space to the bishop on c8, and therefore actually I think just by logical means a3 is the most logical approach here. Instead of a3 there's also e3 and then a3. It's not a big difference, it's just a different move order, but the outcome is the same. I went for a3, she took. She went knight f6, e3, and here she surprised me with c6. And this move hadn't been a surprise if I had also been clever enough to check her husband's games before, and I do so. The thing is like that before they actually played c6, they used to play c5, and this was quite popular in the past. Nowadays, this line actually is supposed to be just better for white and gives white a more decent play, but well, the thing is like theory of course develops, and if you're not aware of the latest games, of course there's always a risk to be badly surprised. And here after c5, just to give you some moves how the game would continue, or what I would recommend here is to take on d5, taking on d5, bishop d3, short castle, and knight e2. And this setup is more precise than to put the knight on f3, because usually black often closes the center with c4, and then you have this idea with f3 and e4, and the knight on e2 therefore is much better than the knight on f3. Plus the knight on e2 could go later to g3, and then at some point there is some ideas connected to the knight on f5, where we all know that the knight is usually super dangerous. So after knight e2, main line goes with b6, for example castle and bishop a6. Black tries to get rid of a bishop pair, of the white's bishop pair, which is quite logical, because once you play against a bishop pair, it's always wise to exchange one, in the most cases at least. And also then, I mean, before getting close to center with c4, it's quite wise to exchange the white's bishop in order also to make use of the white weak squares, especially on b3. Here f3 is the main line, for example rook e8, knight g3, taking, knight c6, and now bishop b2. Developing the bishop, connecting the rooks, and then trying to get rook a e1 and e4 coming. Plus the bishop on b2 may support the pawn on d4 if necessary. I mean, bishop d2, I agree, may look more logical, but anyway, usually the idea of black is to play c4. Let's say something like queen c2 and knight a5, and then at least the knight on b3 would give some pressure to the bishop on d2, and therefore they basically decide to put the bishop on b2, because at least right now it is not quite necessary to make big use of this bishop. I mean, the main line goes bishop b2, rook c8, for example, rook a1, and then the ideas are connected to e4, and once you manage to get e4 and then e5, well, this is quite nice. Plus, I mean, as I said before, the bishop on b2 is protecting the pawn on d4, which means after e4, exchanging on e4, d4 is protected thanks to the bishop on b2, which is the main reason why the bishop is better there then on d2. But this is just a small distraction from my game before it's getting really bad. Because after e3, my opponent went for c6, and well, one of the most natural moves here is to play bishop d3, but this move is actually already like, well, let's say it's not terribly bad, but it's already like the start of being, the start of the moment when things turn not the way you wanted. Instead of bishop d3, a very clever move here, according to the latest theory and the modern theory by top grandmasters, is to play a4. a4 is a waiting move, plus it threats bishop a3, which means that black should immediately castle, not to face bishop a3 and then having problems to castle at all. And then, for example, knight f3, and after b6, which I believe is the strongest move, you take on d5. This all has been played a couple of times. Also, like Diamante used to play exactly this position in the last European Women's Championship against Sagnitze, and she got actually punished for her second attempt going for this line. However, she got punished because, in my opinion here, she chose the wrong recapture. I mean, there had been played e takes d5 and c takes d5. Knight takes d5 doesn't make much sense because you give the center to white, and then after bishop d2, bishop d3, you can push away the knight with e4, e5, and this is quite bad. But e takes d5 is somehow stronger. I mean, it's hard to explain why. I can just show you what happened in the game of Sagnitze against Diamante. She played bishop a3, and after rook e8, there is this nice move bishop b5, which prevents the biggest plan for black to exchange the bishop on c8 with the bishop on b5 connected to bishop a6. And here after bishop b5, we basically force black to answer either with bishop d7 or knight d7, but in both cases we prevent the idea of exchanging this bishop, and that's the reason why e takes d5 actually is better. For example, bishop d7, bishop d3, and this is slightly better. I think in the game it followed knight c6, castle e5, and then they took on e5. And after rook takes e5, I think Nana first played bishop b2, but also c4 is possible. And here we have two bishops in an open position against bishop and knight, and this actually gives white a small advantage. However, Huyefan against Fabiano Caruana was more clever and chose to take on d5 with the e-pawn. And here the problem is that now we have no defense against bishop a6, so black achieves one of his main goals to exchange the big bishops, the light squared bishops, and this is quite important for the weakness of the white squares. Fabiano, he went for bishop d3, bishop a6, castle, and after c5, I think he went for knight e5. He later on won this game, but actually it was not because of the opening, it was just because Huyefan at some point made an imprecise move, and in this level, as Fabio Caruana and Huyefan are playing, imprecisions, even in a very, very small way, are quite badly usually punished. This is just for the record, and well, a4 is a move to be played, and I went for bishop d3. Looks very nice, but after e5 I understood that this is not actually what I wanted. So after e5, the first thing I calculated was to take here, but I understood after d takes c4, bishop takes c4, queen d1, king d1, and knight g4, f2 and e5 is hanging, which means I'm forced to protect my pawn on f2, and after knight takes e5, bishop e2, bishop f5. I understood I have to give away one of my bishops, so I can't really make use of my bishop pair, which is quite sad. I mean, of course, I could try to save my bishops with king d2, but after castle and rook d8 check, it's not like the way to play, or that's what we actually wanted. So I think I have to go for f3, and after knight d3 check, bishop d3, for example, e4, to get my bishop on c1 out. Black can answer with f5, and this position gives zero problems for black. It's even maybe just because of the weak structure. C3 and A3 slightly preferable. However, I think by practical means it will be ending in a draw. However, after e5, since I didn't like this outcome, d takes e5, I chose to take here on d5. Interesting actually is the move knight e2, which probably I should have tried. And for example, e4, bishop c2. If now she takes on c4, then after knight c3, I get some small compensation. I attack the pawn on e4. If bishop g4, I simply go f3, taking, bishop e6 and short castle. I have a pawn down, but I have the center, I have the bishop pair, so I have for sure enough compensation. I would actually prefer here to be white. And for example, if queen e7, then also I'd simply go for castle, for example castle, and then I have ideas with f3 or a4 and bishop a3, and even this is more than enough compensation for me. Even probably this position is objectively already better for white. Which means d takes c4 is not that great. I think black should go for castling, and after castle simply go b6 with a similar idea of getting the bishop out on a6, and this position is quite unclear. For sure white is not worse, for sure white is also not better, but at least this would have been much better than what actually happened in my game. After e5, I took on d5 and she played e4, bishop e2. Maybe I should have gone for bishop c2, but I didn't like to get away of the diagonal f1, a6, especially when I understand that at some point she will go for b6 and bishop a6. I went here to play bishop e2, but my big problem is of course my quite sad knight on g1. For some reason I thought like, okay, I can go with my knight to h3 and allow the double pawn, but well, that's what actually I did in the game, and this was probably the worst thing I could do because I totally underestimated my position eventually. She took on d5, I went for c4 in order not to prevent this c4 move by things like queen c7, b6, bishop a6. She castled, I played rook b1, which is still fine because at least now if she develops a bishop I could consider to take on b7. She played knight c6, bishop d2 is also okay, and after rook b8 I think I did the last main mistake, which actually cost me the game. I played knight h3. Okay, I mean the position is already like not so easy for me because it's quite difficult to develop this knight. Maybe I should have bitten in the sour apple, that's what we say in German, probably doesn't work in English. I should have gone for h4 and then knight h3. Of course it's not what I wanted, but at least I wouldn't have lost in the way I lost in the game. After rook b8 I went knight h3, and I actually underestimated that the structure would be so killing for me because I thought like I had two bishops, what can possibly go wrong? Okay, a bad structure, but at least two bishops. But well, she taught me my lesson after that. She took and played queen d7. Now h3 is hanging, so I took on d5 to distract. Knight takes d5 and I played queen b3, not allowing queen takes h3 because of d5. She played rook d8, and here I did the last main mistake. I played bishop c4. I think bishop g4 at least wouldn't have lost immediately. Of course I provoke f5, I should go back, but now h3 is not hanging. For example, king h8, yet black is much better because I am very bad developed and my king is super weak. I went for bishop c4, she played knight b6 and bishop f1 to protect my my pawn on h3, but here she has this nice move knight e5, and now I can't take on e5 because d2 is hanging, so I'm forced to play bishop e2, and here she just checked. I had to take, and now I have no way to protect my pawn on h3. I tried rook g1, she took, and of course this is already badly lost. I played rook g3, queen takes h2, rook takes f3, and queen h5. Rook g3, and now the knight is coming to d5 and joining the attack. My white squares are quite weak, and it was just a couple of moves before I actually could resign. Here she found some nice tactical trick, connected with knight f4, because after e takes f4 my queen on b3 would be hanging and it was time to resign. Well, what I learned from this game was, once, I mean, you understand you're in trouble, probably, I mean, okay, I took quite a lot of energy into it after I understood when she played e5 that things went already bad. But probably, well, I lost, from the psychological point of view, I think I lost the control after she went for e5. And then, well, I think in such moments it's quite important just to stand up, to have a cup of coffee and to have a break. But instead, what is a common mistake is, like, once you're surprised and you understand things didn't turn out the way it should be, you like focus, you're sitting on the board, you feel this pressure, and instead of relaxing and trying to psychologically overcome this small upset, you just do the opposite, and then you go even deeper into the problems. That's what happened in the game, and what I learned mainly from this was, A, I'm nowadays checking all husbands, brothers, sisters, and trainers. And B, once I'm in trouble, I try to promise myself to stand up, to walk around, to have a cup of coffee, and then to sit back with a new mind and try to solve the problems.